Hello friends, as you know, we've been running this series for some time, for a number of months, and it is focusing on what is called modern drama. And when we think of modern drama, then in this context, we think of the 20th century European drama. We are stuck to English mainly, but if we have to go to other, themes that are reflected in the modern drama in other languages in Europe, then generally it is French, American is English, of course, Spanish it can be, or it would be Russian. So we are stuck to the English medium through which the drama has emerged in a big way in the 20th century. And today's lecture would be on T.S. Eliot as a playwright, and I'll be focusing in the second part of the discussion on Murder in the Cathedral, his famous play. This play made him famous. But before I begin my discussion about Eliot as a playwright, let me tell you that Eliot is known generally, and he started writing plays later in life, and it perhaps compelled the atmosphere around him, the conditions around him, they compelled him to express himself in a different form than poetry. I'll not go into the differences that exist between these two mediums, poetry on one side and plays on the other, drama on the other, but let me tell you that there is a lot of difference between the two. When you are a poet, then you talk only about your own feelings, or you observe and write in your particular idiom. But when you write a drama, when you write a play, then you experiment quite a lot with language, with conditions, with opinions. And T.S. Eliot might have thought later in his writing career that he should also play with. He should also be creative in the context of drama. So we discuss in this series T.S. Eliot as a playwright, and we will be talking about Murder in the Cathedral. As I proceed, the T.S. Eliot means Thomas Stearns Eliot. That's his full name, and he is an American author. America and England are inseparable in the 20th century. Initially, it was England that inspired America in all respects, including economic. And after the First World War, things started turning around, and America got more and more mighty, and England became weaker and weaker. So Thomas Stearns Eliot is an American author, but he of course writes in English. And I put it here that he is first a poet, then a playwright, and later a critic also. So it's a very good combination that there is a poet who writes plays and who also thinks in critical terms and can comment on his own poetry as well as on the poetry of the contemporary period as well as the earlier periods, because that would help him have an opinion about literature in general, about the role of literature in society and all those things, and in the role of the teacher, of the teacher, poet, and writer, also combining with the writer talking about himself. He would delve deep into his own mind and will make us familiar with the psychological processes. So a writer like Thomas Stearns Eliot is one who is a combination of all these things, and these get reflected in different forms of literature that he adopts for expression. I say all this in some detail because he lived at a time when life was getting more and more complex, and that people could not survive just as poets or dramatists, and they had to, the content that they expressed also was multifarious. It had a lot of variety, and that variety had to be done justice to. Okay, then Eliot is born in 1888. He has to be 12 years old when the century turns to the 20th century, and he is born in Missouri, United States, and he dies in 1965. So he has a good, a long life, 77 years, and he dies in London, England, because in the latter part of his life he shifted to England, and he also did one or two jobs, and he was one of the most well-known authors of English, and when it came to belonging to England and to America, then both countries would be feeling proud to carry their own name as the background of T.S. Eliot. So he became a known figure. In fact, since we were at that time a colony of the Britishers, when he was mainly active in literature, therefore he became famous in India also, and he became a part of the English curriculum. He is taught even today majorly as a writer, as a poet, and as a dramatist in Indian universities. His poetic works, everybody knows him in the context of the great poem that he wrote, The Wasteland, The Hollow Man, then another poem, Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. This of course is one of his earliest poems, and Prufrock is written in 1915. The First World War has begun, and Eliot is perhaps indirectly keeping in mind the very hard conditions that the First World War created. He wrote plays, 5 in all. The major plays, Murder in the Cathedral, but he wrote other plays also later, and their titles will give you a lot of food for thought. Just focus upon the titles, and some kind of picture emerges in our mind of the Europe of the 20th century. So, Elder Statesman is one play, The Cocktail Party is another, Confidential Clerk is the third, Family Reunion is the fourth, and of course this adds to 5 because earlier I mentioned Murder in the Cathedral. Just see that the first title is a very weighty title. It's a very significant title, and it gives you, it compels you to give a lot of consideration, to the theme content of this play. Elder Statesman, that is a typical, English or European expression that people are statesmen, they are great political leaders and they are visionaries, and if you become senior, then you are known all over the world. Cocktail Party is once again the urban phenomena, and it makes people sit together and discuss and gossip and enjoy, and this kind of a scene can't be visualized in the Indian conditions, particularly in the first half of the 20th century, but this was perhaps the center of attraction for most of the British or even European citizens. So he registers the complexities of the cocktail party and raises questions. Then there is Confidential Clerk. This is a slightly tricky title. Confidential has the connotation of hiding something. You have to observe what is called confidentiality. You will not tell people what you are, who you are, what you are doing, whom or what you are watching, keeping an eye on. And then, of course, it's a clerk. Clerk also, I wouldn't like to comment here on this, but then definitely a government functionary. Family reunion also can be the modern phenomena of living, particularly in England and Europe, because people branch out of a family, they branch out into different areas, and they don't live together, and there are certain days on which they decide to get together, and that can be the family reunion. So these are the plays. You just think that the first play one has to interpret specifically as a part of the cathedral connotations. Cathedral is a monument, is a place where some kind of religious gathering occurs, and it is addressed by a great Christian scholar. And if there is a murder happening there, then that causes raising of the eyebrows. And perhaps he is talking about some murder that happened way back in the beginning of the second millennium. Indeed, objectively speaking, the murder that is being presented in this play, indirectly and directly both, happened sometime in the 12th century. So he takes it up as a question, and he is focusing upon the person who was murdered at that time. So that's a serious play of a different kind. The other 4 plays, I think, bother about the upper middle class existence, but they may not be as appealing as Murder in the Cathedral, and that's why I thought that I would be focusing in the second part of the discussion on this major play, Murder in the Cathedral. Let me inform you, let me tell you that Murder in the Cathedral is being taught in almost all the universities, where Eliot is presented as a dramatist, and therefore it's a very popular play also in India. Some points generally about his dramatic persona, dramatic personality are these. He belongs to a new form that emerged in the second half of the 19th century, and it was quite popular in the beginning of the 20th century. It's called poetic drama. Now, initially I told you that he was a poet, and later on he became a dramatist, and I also said, that there were differences in poetry on one side and drama on the other, and the two were distinct, different forms. They might borrow from each other, but then they were separate forms. But then in the early 20th century, a new form emerged, and it was a merger of poetry and drama. And poetic drama in the larger sense can be there in the Renaissance period also. It can be there in the Elizabethan period, as we all know. Shakespeare is mostly is a poetic dramatist, and he uses verse. He uses, of course, blank verse for projecting the reality of the Elizabethan and post-Elizabethan periods. So he writes poetic drama, but the way after the decline of drama in the 18th and 19th centuries, its emergence as poetic drama now draws our attention. So what is poetic drama? I believe that poetic drama is at the two levels now. That reality is being conceived as a matter of poetic perception. You just form an opinion. You just form an image of the reality around you, and you behave as a poet. You work as a poet. So your method is poetic too. Approach the conditions in the middle of which you live. Verse drama is the same as poetic drama, but then verse is emphasized, which means that sometimes you will have to verse used very consciously, and when you do it consciously, then you have to defend it also as to why you are using it. And let me tell you that T.S. Eliot used a very specific form. It was called the common man's kind of versification, and this was not in the blank verse either, and therefore it had to be called verse drama in that sense. Religious drama, once again, there can be discussions about this. Can drama be religious, and can religion be a fit subject for drama? And there can be whole discussions on it. In fact, there are books on it at the level of theory, that drama has to be essentially social. It cannot be religious, because it's a question of faith, and faith cannot be contended with. You cannot say, well, there is a dialogue in the faith. There are, of course, dialogues in philosophers under the larger category of religion, but generally they are about the problem of creation and all those things. Godliness and the role of the devil in our midst and things like that. Some religious drama was written in the Renaissance period, and particularly in English, but I think it will be stretching the imagination to say that Shakespeare, even though he sometimes thought about the religious themes, that he was a religious dramatist. But in the 20th century, people started using drama in order to project a religious vision, and in fact, in this case, T.S. Eliot is one of the great practitioners of religious drama, and the drama that we are talking about, mainly in his case, Murder in the Cathedral, is under the strong category of religious drama. So please keep that in mind when I discuss Murder in the Cathedral, that it is an example of religious drama. Then if you adopt the term religious drama, then other things follow. For instance, the next concept that I'm talking about is the search for conscience. So, is conscience an important factor in social life? What role does it play in coming in touch with, coming in contact with the people around you? How do you form a political opinion, a social opinion? Think of bringing about change, building all this around the concept of conscience. It's very difficult. Novelists, short story writers, prose writers in general, they refer to conscience, but then very soon they branch out to areas like pain, suffering, conflict, exploitation, hard social conditions, poverty, riches. All these things come into picture, and conscience is pushed into the background. So maybe in the 20th century, people are writing verse drama. They are also writing religious drama, and they are just going to every man. The term that I should use for the point that is linked with T.S. Eliot. So every man's verse, for instance. And then the conscience part is brought out in that context. All these things are pursued in the religious drama, and you can discuss this thing particularly in the case of Murder in the Cathedral, the play that we have with us. Characters providing comic relief, that doesn't happen in religious drama. So maybe the reference in my case would be to other plays of T.S. Eliot, where he was presenting one or two characters who would lighten the effect of great questions that T.S. Eliot would pose in his plays. So if a good discussion is going on and people feel slightly heavy in their head watching the play, then Eliot can experiment with some light characters, telling us, well, let's also think about relaxation. And relaxation, one of the important things for relaxation is that you present comedy, you talk comically, and people then feel relaxed. And therefore, the next thing is use of gentle humor. Yes, that gives comic relief. And gentle humor also is something different from raucous humor. Raucous humor is loud humor, and little violent also in its tone. But gentle humor is where you make people smile, and other people also enjoy it. So if you are in a gathering, if you are in a company of 10 or 12 people, and if you are sitting over, let's say, a cup of coffee, and you are talking and chatting about family matters, about friends, about questions of education, then a little of teasing in that group is the word, and gentle humor does that. And Eliot in his other plays also uses gentle humor to once again provide to the audience in the theatre what is called comic relief. And these plays that Eliot wrote in the latter half of his career, those four plays I have already referred to, then they are categorized as drawing room comedies, because he doesn't allow his characters to move out of the drawing room. They come, they sit there, they talk, they banter, and they attack each other satirically, but not in the disturbing terms, but as I use the word gentle. So it's a drawing room comedy applied to Eliot's later plays. So I've given you an idea of Eliot as a dramatist in general. One important poetic drama. All others also are poetic in nature, but then they come from religion to society, and they give you a view of the 20th century or late 19th century society in his plays. He picks up characters from there, those who belong to the past and those who belong to the present, and the way they exchange opinions and views. So that is the kind of playwright that Eliot became in the latter part of his writing or literary career. Issue of prospect of peace after retirement from politics being disturbed. This is presented in The Elder Statesman, the play that he wrote later. In this play, Lord Claverton refers to the ghosts who haunted and spectres from my past. So So see that even though the play is rooted in the 20th century, then there are references which are from the past, and some of the characters may be concrete in the modern context, but then they seem to belong to another period. So you have characters in these plays who will contend with new issues of the 20th century, but then their minds would have been formed and structured in the previous centuries, particularly the 19th century. So these are the words that Eliot himself used when he had to explain his points of the plays that he wrote, and therefore they are important for our understanding of Eliot's interest in drama in the latter part of his life. In the context of verse drama, Eliot referred to Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem Aurora Leigh. There is a poem that she wrote, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Browning's wife, Robert Browning's wife, in the mid-19th century. There she said something very, for the 19th century people, very scandalous. And do you know what she said? And she defined it. Browning, this Elizabeth Barrett, E.V. Browning, defines a different kind of form that is now necessitated in the context of writers, and she calls it novel in verse. Why novel in verse? Novel is always in prose. Novel in his long sentences. Novel in his telling and explaining, in stating a fact, in insisting on an opinion. So there's no verse required for that. But then she says that there should be an experiment, and she gives her own title, Aurora Leigh, the explanation that it's a novel in verse. So novel cannot be written in verse, but people can experiment, and there can be certain novels which are essentially poetic in nature. So this is the phrase that occurred in the middle of the 19th century, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, the major woman writer of the 19th century, she experimented with it, and Eliot refers to it in his own essays, that maybe the idea for him to write drama in verse came from there. So it was a different kind of a thing, and let's see what Elizabeth Barrett Browning said in the context. In Book 5 of it, Aurora Leigh, in Book 5 of it, Aurora ridicules the convention of the stage. Well, if you are questioning, criticizing the conventions of the stage, then how do you write a play? But anyway, she says that they are worth ridiculing. Aurora, in lines that follow, articulates her view of drama. So now let's have a look at what this character in the novel, or in the verse novel that Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote, what she says, the character. So Aurora says this: I will write no plays. I will, and why would she not write plays? Because lower appeals, lower means lower parts of life, they appeal. It submits more menially, adopts the standard of the public taste to chalk its height on. So that's why plays will not be written, because sometimes the plays talk only about the unimportant aspects of life, and she has decided not to write plays. And this particular sentence was used by Eliot to explain why he was inspired by this particular quotation, and he started rethinking about the character of drama, the character of poetry, and the character also of the novel, and that's how he made a background for the verse drama that he would practice in the 20th century. Thank you.